as Shahzada said, it's perpetual learning is the cornerstone of success these days. Managing uncertainty is about three things. It's about prediction. So in this world, predicting likely scenarios. You won't get it exactly right, but predicting likely scenarios. Let me give you an example, right? So if you are a dairy company and you're in the dairy business,
yes,
you should expect that your business is at least going to be partially disrupted by plant-based milk. And what are the implications of that, right? So do you set up a oat milk business yourself? Do you buy somebody else? Or you say, you know what, I'm going to ignore that threat because it's not a sufficiently large threat yet, right? You have options. So I think first one is predictability, looking at broad changes in direction, right? So I think that's one. So today, if you're a business leader, you're going to say, sooner or later, you're going to get carbon tax in most parts of the world. How do I adapt to that? So that's one. One is predictability. Second is adaptability. Do you have an organization that's a learning organization that can respond quickly to uncertain events and pivot and change direction if required? So that to me is adaptability. And the third is resilience. And resilience is about, even if the worst case scenario occurs, do you have a strong enough balance sheet? Do you have a resilient enough management team to be able to overcome these uncertain events? So it refers to what it takes to be an anti-fragile organization. So it's about predictability and rather prediction, adaptability, and resilience. And if you can get that combination right, as opposed to just a pure focus on efficiency, which was the mantra for the last 20 years, you can be a very successful anti-fragile organization. Globalization peaked in 2007, 2008, when global trade as a percentage of global GDP was 60%, roughly. Right now, in 2021-22, it's gone down to about 56%. So clearly, there's been a retreat of globalization, right? That said, I do think you cannot. I mean, globalization is a centuries-long phenomenon. There's been globalization ever since. I mean, even before the Romans, leave alone, more recently, right? So globalization.
They called it conquering them.
Silk Road and so on and so forth. So the globalization is a long-term phenomenon and hard to completely brush aside. But we do see what our macroeconomist at Bain, Karen Harris, calls globalization. I don't like that term, but what it means is globalization is going to retreat for the next several decades, and we all have to be prepared. So what this really means is you're going to see a lot more protectionism. You're going to see, you as a multinational company, you need to be very thoughtful about whether you play in certain markets. If you choose to play in certain markets, how do you play in those markets? What are the implications and everything from your ownership structure to management? So if you take, just to give you a few examples, if you take Sequoia, which is one of the leading venture capital firms in the world, Sequoia has separated its US business, its China business, and its India business, because they feel that it's untenable to run these three businesses at the global firm, right? Many companies are looking at carving out their China business because they feel that when you mix up the two business, when you have China working along with America, you just could easily fall foul of trade sanctions, so on and so forth. At the same time, you want to preserve optionality, so you have a separate ownership structure for the China business. So I think just for multinationals, you need to think about those issues. You need to think about how you participate more domestically. So the days of I'm going to manufacture everything in Mexico and I'm going to ship everything to Europe or the US is gone. I do think there's an expectation that you add local value, right? You take Indonesia and what's happening with nickel, right? Historically, they used to take the raw material out of the ground and just ship it out, no value add local. And they said, no, this is not acceptable. Why should other people capture the value? But we want to do some processing in country to create value. And they should be focused instead on what can we do to alleviate the needs of people around us who are less fortunate. So one of the things we tend to find a lot of interest in during tough times is the chance to do some sort of social impact, give back to society. So we pivot in tough times, in tough economic times, we pivot many of our fun activities. So we do office retreats, etc. we pivot them to become much more activities uh, to essentially do social good. So I remember once during the GFC, we went to Bintan and we said, we're not going to have fancy parties and costume parties and all that. We're going to go and spend the whole day playing with children in an orphanage, right? And so it just marks to market to people. This is the real world. I'm so fortunate to be where I am, and I should be focused. I should be grateful, and I should be trying to contribute. So I think that's the one. I think second, I'd go back to the point I made earlier: higher purpose. What can Engro do to nation build? I do think companies like Engro have a responsibility to nation build. You've done that very, very well so far, but I think there's even more to do, right? So what can you do to unlock certain sectors? Are there new businesses you can get into? Are there existing businesses where you can, expand dramatically? So there's the whole. I would make a much bigger deal of the nation building aspect. I think then there are some hygiene things that you do. So, for example, one thing we always do is we get feedback we have an annual employee survey. We get feedback from our employees. How are they feeling about Bain? How are they feeling about their office? How are they feeling about their assignments? And there are some themes that come through in some of this, right? So one of the things we've really increased recently is because people are working really hard, burnout. So we said it's a good time to offer people sabbaticals, leaves of absence, so they can refresh and they can come back energized. We, in fact, even support people going off and working with not-for-profits with a small subsidy. So they get paid less than they get paid at Bain. And obviously, the not-for-profits can't pay the kind of compensation we pay, but we top up a little bit. So they take a bit of a cut in their comp, but they go off to Africa and work with 1 Acre Fund or whoever else and learn something new and come back, right? And they feel like they're giving. So we do a fair bit of that. And then the final point I'd make, which is again one of the hygiene factors, is for us, for our leaders, we heavily incent our partners and our leaders on how they do with their teams. So we have upward feedback for our leaders twice a year. We publish, we share this feedback with them. The partners know that we incorporate not just their revenue productivity, but also their people impact into their compensation outcomes. If they're to be considered for leadership roles, like to be a managing partner for a country, etc., if you're not absolutely top-notch in leadership of people, you don't get those roles, right? So there's a set of signals you could send that really help employees realize that, hey, you're a wonderful employer, and you take the people value proposition incredibly seriously.